Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of the Golf in Society podcast. Today, I have the great pleasure of being in the company of Dr. Charlie Foster OBE, who is a professor in physical activity and public health. I first came across Charlie when he did an amazing presentation up in Edinburgh to the annual golf and health conference, and it was titled "Why the World Should Play Golf." But there's so much more of an introduction to be done. So without further ado, I'd just like to say welcome to the Golf in Society podcast, Charlie Foster.
Thank you so much, Anthony. It's a real pleasure to be here. As you know, I'm a massive fan of all the great work that you and all your volunteers and golf clubs around the country are doing. And I saw it as an opportunity at that time during that conference to highlight the great work you were doing, because we have to get it to the attention of the policymakers so you can get some more money.
That sounds good. That sounds a good start.
Definitely.
For the audience, just to put your sort of professional background and expertise in context, would you mind explaining your role, your previous roles, and what you're doing at the moment?
Sure. So by the professor title gives a bit of a clue. So I'm an academic who's been researching the benefits of being active, taking exercise. And that journey's taken me from Oxford University to Bristol University, and now over to Dublin, over at the Royal College of Surgeons over there as well. And I've always been really passionate. I describe myself as a bit of a pracademic. I'm an academic who understands the theory and the concepts, but my job is to really make them try and come alive in a practical sense. And I think that's really been my reason for being. The last 10 years, since 2012 to 2023, the end of COVID, I was the principal advisor to all the chief medical officers in the UK, Wales, England, Northern Ireland, Scotland, on around physical activity, exercise and sport. So covered a lot of different kinds of research, having to broker it, explain it to politicians, why it matters. Mostly the costs of diseases that are related to inactivity, and then try and, infuse and encourage them to realize that actually being active, it doesn't matter whether you're, digging in your garden or putting on a putting green, everything you do will improve the quality of your life just by the sheer being the joy of movement. And it's supposed to be fun as well. So that's really what I'm about. I stopped after COVID, survived that bit, decided it was someone else's turn to be principal advisor. And now I work over in Ireland for a non-government organization called VHI Healthcare as head of prevention, but still very connected with the golf world and still very connected with my passion projects. And this is one of them. So thank you so much for letting me come on and speak about it.
Well, like most of the people that join our podcast, it's great to have you on board as an ambassador and talking so positively about what we do at Golf in Society. But I think we should start with a little bit of the sort of the pain and the challenge that we face, Charlie. And for the audience, would you just mind putting into context the scale of the inactivity crisis with some maybe headline stats and some of the key things that we face, not as a nation but as a globe?
Yeah. So look, if we let's think about the UK for a moment, and particularly England, that's where most of the data comes from that I've been dealing with. We have a kind of people say we have an inactivity crisis. We don't really until you become an adult. Most of our kids are actually quite active, and most certainly twice as active as most of our adult population. So everyone says, "Oh, it's all about the kids not doing enough movement, etc., etc." They're sitting in their armchairs, not shifting themselves. So fundamentally, as you get older, the amount of activity you do goes down. And we all know the reasons why. It's because you've got a job, because you've got a family, because you've got caring responsibilities, you've got kids demanding your attention. You're a mobile taxi and cash point. That's basically your life, perhaps as an adult. Certainly was mine for the last few years. And during that time, the kind of habit of movement just kind of gradually erodes. So, I go and watch rugby matches, and I see a lot of people who used to play rugby who couldn't play it anymore, and don't really do anything at all. But they dine out on the fact that for between their 20s and 30s, this is amazingly fit rugby player. You can't bank your fitness. You have to go and use it every day or you lose it. So the statistics sort of say, look, as a nation, we're not particularly bad, but not particularly good. And what the problem about the not movement bit is, it contributes to lots of other diseases that we know are prevalent in society right now, like being overweight and obese, like having high blood pressure, and like having high rates of diabetes. And I think I'm probably the only health professional in the world who's moved from one country, the UK, to Ireland, where the rates are even higher. So I've got an even bigger challenge over there. We're talking 65 to 70% across both countries, overweight and obese. And that's, that hasn't happened in the last 100 years. It's happened in the last 20 years. So this is a real challenge. And of course, all those other sort of non-communicable diseases that are connected in activity are a problem. But the great news is any movement will help improve how you feel physically and how you feel mentally and psychologically. And if you do it with lots of other people, it's a great laugh. So that's good for you.
I think that's absolutely key that you bring in that laughter and interestingly, that togetherness as well. I think that, especially later in life, probably some of your sporting pals are no longer with you. The opportunities to play your main sports, you think they've gone forever. And possibly some of them have, but not all of them need to have gone. And it's about having the opportunity to rediscover what I call your sporting fix. You sort of, your reason to get out of bed on a morning and have that bit of banter with your mates and feel as though you've got that sense of purpose and achievement. And I've seen it so much with our golfing sessions, even just on a putting green. The joy and emotion that is seen when someone gets that put on the putting green in to win for the team. It's almost like priceless. And we've tried in what we do at Golf in Society to try and bottle that up. Because Charlie, I'll be quite honest with you. When I started Golf in Society, people thought I was crazy trying to teach people with dementia and Parkinson's and stroke survivors and all the, depression, all those types of challenges that we to actually learn a game that even able-bodied young people call one of the most difficult sports you can ever play. But somehow, and I don't know how, but I've obviously done something right, I've managed to stimulate brains facing these cognitive challenges to get and stimulate the brain to tell the body to give this thing a go. Now, I think it's quite interesting because in your presentation where you talked about why everyone should play golf, there was a whole section on there on brain health.
Yeah, we love a bit of brain health.
That's a bit that fascinated me. So what am I doing to that brain with how I'm coaching on our teams of coaching and supporting people for the brain to encourage the body to give it a go?
Absolutely. So any activity that involves you moving involves your brain having to balance you, and your brain having to direct you, and your brain having to control your motor function. So of course, golf's fabulous because you walk, you talk, you make decisions, you hold clubs, you swing them, sometimes well, sometimes badly, and sometimes a little, and sometimes a lot, depending on what kind of club it is. And all that is challenging your brain in a really positive manner. And we know from the science, and people like Dr. Andrew Murray, who you'll know is the CMO for the DP World Tour, a really brilliant golf and health advocate. He's done all the physiological bits. We know that the health benefits are there. But I was really interested in what goes on in your brain, because we just done this little piece of work when I was at Oxford, where we were scanning people's brains who were participating in an exercise study. And amongst the young adults, and these are young, so young being under 40, it's quite young for you. No, I'm well past that now. But we saw that there was a real connection between how fit they were and some of these structural issues going on in their brain. And I'm going to talk about molehills and pot bunkers. So molehills are lumps and pot bunkers are dips. And within the circulation walls of your blood vessels in your brain, you get these white and grey matter lesions, these potholes and molehills. And of course, this disrupts the blood flow around your brain. And of course, that the blood flow being disrupted, it causes stress and strain elsewhere, et cetera, and your brain doesn't function quite as well. Now, golf is the perfect tonic for this, because every time you grab something in your hands and grip, you deploy your grip strength. When you deploy your grip strength, holding, no matter what kind of lock you've got, overlapping, interlocking, don't matter, you're holding your golf club and you're squeezing. what happens to your brain is your brain goes, oh, I've got to do something now, Charlie. I better hold this golf club the right way, stand the right way, balance the right way. Think, oh, I've got to go swing now. So you've got about 36 different executive processes are going on in your head at the same time. Good. Your blood in your brain has to be constantly pumped to make your brain work. So that's called our central cerebral vascular reserve. And if you squeeze something, it goes up. Now, unfortunately, as we get a bit older, we're a little less sufficient at that kind of managing that balance. So what you may have noticed amongst your fabulous participants is actually they get a little bit better at these things as they go on and get a bit more confident because their brain is really good at readapting really quickly. So that kind of cerebral vascular reserve goes up. And the problem is, as we get older, we're almost 100 times less efficient as a 20-year-old if we're in our 60s. Yeah, it's a pain, I know, but that's just the way of the world. So golf is the perfect tonic because it asks you to maintain your cerebrovascular reserve, your grip strength, your balance, and all these different functions that are going on in your head at the same time. And I'll give everyone a little tip and a challenge at home now if you're listening. If you want to improve your golf, there's a fabulous study done by some Korean female golfers who practiced a 10-second slow motion swing without a golf club. And they did it 5 times every day, and they did about 5 swings in a minute. So you practice these 10-second swings. And what it was doing was asking your body to recreate the physiologicals and cognitive responses you have when you play golf. Why does it matter? When they measured their brains after a series of 6 weeks of doing these trials, the bits of their brains that are responsible for these functions had become stronger and fitter. Just by swinging in an imaginary golf club. Imagine that.
That's amazing. I'm going to be out there tomorrow morning practicing that and videoing that. You know, I like to be in front of a camera. I'm going to be
do that.
So I'm going to share that with our audience.
Oh, no, please do, definitely. And you know, I could show you. I think they did 40 hours of training, and it improves what's called the functional neuroplasticity. It's all the bits in your brain that work well. And it doesn't matter whether they were professional golfers, because that was one group, or non-professional golfers, that was the other group. Everybody got a bit better. How good is that? It's a gift that keeps on giving, golf.
I mean, I suppose the other reason that sort of golf stands out as a great sport to play is you can do it till you pop your clogs. Really, as we talked, even if you just sat in a wheelchair at the edge of a putting green or in a care home environment, then you're actually gripping a club and being engaged in a game of, you know, chipping and putting. It's actually, as you've just said, all those things are still going on, even at that late stage, even when you can't get to a traditional environment where you can play that traditional game of golf. Completely.
And to be honest, most people who claim they play golf in this country don't play on golf courses. You know, they go to ranges, they play on public courses, they play pitch and putt. They go to a bar and drink beer and do putting competitions. You know, there's lots of different ways you can enjoy golf. Now, you know, obviously I'm a bit obsessed about what's going on inside someone's head and their body when they're playing. But the whole point why we go back, as you mentioned already, it's the B word, it's the banter, it's the hanging out with your friends. You know, that one moment when you hit a decent shot out of 100, or the one shot you hit out of 100 that's hilarious and everyone remembers for the rest of your life. Those kind of connections are really, really valuable. And then you can be a 1-foot putt or a 300-yard drive. It doesn't matter, because if somebody's witnessed it, it happened and it was true. And you've always got that kind of memory. And I remember you challenged me just before we started to remind the kind of punchline of why it matters. You know, when I speak to policymakers, it's about trying to convince them that they need to put their hands in their pockets and, you know, invest in things properly. But that's a whole nother podcast. But what we have to do here is make things really simple for them and say, okay, we're going to go and play golf. And they go, oh, golf, that's an elitist sport that people like you play, Charlie, did it in your private club, whatever. No. It's a mechanism to help people connect, provide care opportunities, and help people rebuild themselves and give themselves a little bit of independence and happiness. So if you go and play golf, actually what you are doing, if we start translating into the health terms that policymakers might understand, is improve my mental health, deploying multiple different brain functions, including attention, motor planning, coordination, calculation of timing, and emotional control. Oh, and having fun by hitting a little white ball in a hole. That's what it's about.
I think also the key thing for me is, and we often overlook them, is that we've got these wonderful people facing these life-changing diagnoses, things that have happened in their life through no fault of their own sometimes, and you've got them, but also behind that you've got a family network. And when a challenge comes the way of a family, it's normally the loved one that picks up the caring responsibility. And I think sometimes they're overlooked, and the importance that we put upon making sure that the unpaid carers in particular get the opportunity to build up their own resilience, to have a good time, to meet new friends, and share the burden of things, and understanding that they're not alone in this challenge. And we've found that the beauty of having such wonderful green spaces and beautiful clubhouses, that often in the time of day that we run our services, which is that sort of 10 till 2 p.m. window during the day, they're quite quiet, they're quite relaxed. And, rather than going to a busy coffee shop or going to a community centre where there's loads of noise and chatter and everything else, the carers in particular have found it very, very therapeutic to be in those settings. And we've actually had the chance, Charlie, by having the time with them, to sit down and ask them, with the brilliant help of our occupational therapists, what it is that would improve their lives, that would give them more resilience to go home and go into that role of not just being wife or husband, but also the carer with prime responsibility for making sure their loved one is having a good time and having a good life. And we found that those sessions have been brilliant, because we've then been able to plan out specific sessions, whether it be about anger management, sleep deprivation, whatever it might be. And we found them absolutely brilliant for the carers. And the carers, honestly, it's like you've given them the crown jewels, or you've given them a lottery ticket that's won so much money for them, because they're so thankful for the fact that someone's actually listened, taken the time to not just worry about their husband or their wife, but also about them. And golf clubs, I think, are a beautiful environment in which that can take place.
Yeah, well, I can only agree with everything you've said there. And I think as a almost underutilized community resource that sits fairly empty, as you're right, in those sort of midweek, mid-mornings, who wouldn't want people to come in and use it? Who wouldn't want people to have a cup of tea, tell their friends, oh, it's great down the golf club. You can go there for Sunday lunch if you want. There's lots of things you can do. But helping carers are really responsible. Certainly, I know with my in-laws at the moment, my father-in-law's got early onset dementia, and he stopped playing bowls. And I'm kind of really, you need to kind of keep going, John. Oh, I don't know, I don't think I can do this anymore. I've kind of, my friends, etc. And he's crying out for this support. But of course, the impact is on his wife and my mother-in-law, and it's that double burden of these diseases, not just the person, it's also the family and the extended family as well. Also, but so by giving people opportunities to have new strategies as ways of coping are really important. I'm going to call out the fact that it's a massively underfunded area publicly. We need to get more money into this sort of area, full stop. But you and I are part of that campaign, so we will not give that one up. But allowing people just to have almost half an hour for themselves when they spend their lives giving themselves on behalf of someone else is really, really important. So kudos to you and your volunteers, because it's fantastic work. And I'm going to share a story now. When I was at the RNA conference a few years ago, the one you saw, I played your video. I flagrantly stole it, but I did ask your permission. I think you remember.
You did, and you did. Great. I gratefully gave it to you.
You did indeed. And the reason I played that video, because the whole place is full of doctors, academics, policymakers, etc., is because I wanted them to see the human story. And it doesn't matter how many brain scans I can show up there. It doesn't matter how many graphs of clinically significant changes in arterial blood pressure, whatever. If I can find one voice to make your program come alive, that was all I needed. And that video absolutely, in my words of my teenage daughter, slayed. And there was silence in the room when I played it. And there were a few people kind of quite choked up because there's nothing more powerful than hearing somebody who needed help and who got it. So thank you for letting me use that. And I've always used that video. It's fabulous. And I can't wait to see the rest of the research that's coming out of your great work as well.
Well, that's a nice little segue there, actually, because this week is an important week for us, Charlie, because the latest research project that we've been running over the last 12 months, the final report for all the evidence comes out on the 14th of Feb. Now, just so the audience understand, what we've done is we've reimagined golf clubs as health hubs. So what we've done is we've sat down with basically health and social care stakeholders, carers, people with the diagnosis, and in particular, your advice as well in terms of, which sort of cohort of people living with morbidity to focus on. We focused on dementia and frailty to start with.
Yeah.
And basically, what we did with all of those people in the room, including PGA golf professionals and occupational therapists and physiotherapists, we sat down and we went through a co-creation a process that allowed us to build up customer personas, we called them, where we got an insight into the lives of carers, the lives of people living with dementia and frailty. And then with all of the health and social care stakeholders and the researchers and everyone else in the room, we then started mapping out what their current support looked like, where the gaps were, and how, using a golf club, could we improve their overall mental, physical, and most importantly, emotional well-being. And then after that, what we did is we designed a 12-week program. And the 12-week program brought people into the service who signed up for the research, and basically measured their physical and cognitive function in week 1, then again in week 6, and then finally after 12 weeks. But we didn't just do it for the people with the diagnosis. We did it with the carers too. And to be honest, I can't wait to share the outcomes with you, because many of the things we've touched on so far, such as grip strength, balance, sense of purpose, feeling more positive about life, hope for the future, or whichever way you're going to cut the research and the evidence, is very compelling. And to think that has all happened at a golf club,
in the real world, and not in a lab.
Totally. Yeah. So the whole investment has been in people sitting down and redesigning with the families an intervention that works for them. It's used the existing infrastructure, the built and green space of a local golf club, and it's basically just offered it up to people who never even thought that they would go to a golf club. And the next phase for me, once we've published the results, is quite exciting, because there's 2,500 golf clubs in the UK. We've talked previously about potentially building 42 new hospitals. Well, hospitals don't have the green space that golf clubs have got. They don't have the beautiful clubhouses, the hospitality, and all those types of things. So really, we think there's a great opportunity to give people access to these health and social care support networks, but also the chance to meet new people, to experience new spaces, all in their local communities, on their doorstep. And the one thing that always goes down well with these programs, Charlie, is they all get free parking.
I was about to mention the parking. Unlike hospitals, say that. Yeah, no, it's fabulous. And I can imagine that having that moment when people first gather and you discover that, this couple's from down the road and that's near my auntie's, and you have that almost instant connection, particularly with the carers, who realize they don't feel so isolated. They're not just themselves. I think that's coming together is so powerful. And you described there, as the research parlance describes, as kind of cooperative co-production building of an intervention. It's the stuff that research councils love. They like to fund it, and they like to give more money to things that have been built using these principles. So well done again. Absolutely the right path to be following. And let me know if I can help in the next stage. I'd love to be part of it.
No, that's fantastic. I just going back to something you touched on earlier, because obviously we focus at the moment very much on that older population. And that's when people develop these sort of multimorbidities that are sometimes life-changing. So people, as you said, during a normal life cycle, let's say without a morbidity, you tend to become less active as you get older. I found it quite interesting that almost like as you're getting older, as you can't play the sports that you used to enjoy, you've got that sort of lower sense of self-esteem because you can't do what you used to be able to do. But then you've got the double whammy of having to deal with something that stops you potentially thinking that you can play sport ever again. And I think that is a really, really important time in people's lives when they get that double whammy. And I just, for me, I found that quite a big barrier. And then trying to engage them in a sport that they've never played before, like golf. They might play football, they might play cricket and everything else. So I suppose that has been a big, big challenge. And it's just your insight in terms of how we overcome that sort of that barrier at that crucial moment in people's lives.
Yeah. So thank you. I mean, it's a really challenging, complex question, and there aren't any simple answers. I can talk about some of my experiences. So I worked in cardiac rehabilitation in a big Midlands hospital for a number of years. And, people would have that double whammy moment. They'd have a heart attack. They'd be on the rehab ward. They'd be concerned and worried they can't go back and do the things they used to do because the pain they had at heart attack might basically be the same as the pain they might feel when they're unfit walking up the stairs. So you have that kind of massive anxiety there. So it's helping people along that journey, allowing them to have permission and kind of to work back to what they think they can do. The problem is, it's a bit like reading books in a library. You've got to try lots of different things and you've got to find the one that you love. And if it's about the banter and the social, then there's nothing better than standing in a putting green with 5 people say you're going to miss that 3-footer or you're going to make that 3-footer, because it's not about the 3-foot putt. It's about the folk in the moment. And you can't do that on a bicycle. You can't really do that. Even walking, it's quite tricky because you got to work out where you're going and make sure you're not going too fast. And, do you stand beside somebody behind them? And but golf is one of the few sports you can play. You can look someone in the eyes, they're doing it. You have that kind of much more ease together. So for me, it's always about offering options. And particularly with golf, it's not necessarily just about hitting a ball. It's about the way you hit the ball or what kind of shot you want to do, or do you just want to go for a walk and follow someone else around and keep score or whatever you want to do to kind of start off with. But all that will involve walking, which we know is the best medicine. And all that will involve all the other bits that golf would have if people want to take it. So sometimes the activity itself isn't the purpose, it's the mechanism. So we just need to give lots of different options to people to try these things. I'm sure you see people grow in confidence and come out of their shells a bit more as the program develops. I've no doubt about that.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I've had probably one of the best moments in my life when we brought a guy who was a great footballer, never played golf before. And we brought him to Rudding Park, and the guy had a hole-in-one.
Oh,
you talk about not being able to write the script. Well, I mean, people were saying to me that time, you coach people with dementia to play golf. Well, no, not just play golf, get holes in one. So, I mean, in terms of do you call it the biomechanical, the endorphins or whatever you can imagine?
Yeah.
How Jim was feeling that day when he got that little ball went in that little hole. So those are the types of things that can be achieved if you create the right framework, the right environment for people to give it a go. And often, Charlie, it just starts with being very welcoming, having a bit of an understanding about the person's background, which is easy to do with the short survey that we ask. And then all of a sudden you've got things that you can hang on to in terms of an initial conversation. And then people think, oh, I feel valued here. Oh, they seem to be taking a bit of an interest in me. And then all of a sudden, when they have the shared interest with other fellow sportsmen or people go through something, also that camaraderie builds from day one, and then they want to learn together, they want to play together, they want to spend time together, they want to tell their favorite stories together in an environment where they know every single week they come, they're going to have a good time. And I suppose that's all now being baked into the DNA of the services that we designed initially, but now deliver on a regular basis.
So I'm going to turn the tables on you. If I could give you a magic wand and you could wave it, and one barrier that you think is ahead of you in terms of growing golf in society would disappear, what would you be waving your wand at?
Well, it used to be the lack of understanding within health and social care professionals about what we do, the difference it makes, and how I can get them to understand that it's not about golf. In fact, it's just about opportunity. It's about giving people a reason to get out of bed on a morning, sense of purpose and everything else, and making them feel as though they have a purpose in life. That to me was one of the biggest things to overcome. But I think we're overcoming that with some of the research, some of the things we've done recently, your support in terms of your experience and background. And I think people are now starting to get the message. But the one thing that still remains, and it still has to be overcome, is accessibility. Because the spaces and places generally at golf clubs are pretty accessible, but they're not always accessible for people with impairments. But also, on top of that, it's transportation. Because as you age and as you become less independent in terms of your transport options, for a lot of people, especially some of the, let's say, the financially challenged families that we support, getting a taxi there, having a bus service that stops outside your front door, they're all still challenges. And if they don't have a driving license anymore and they don't have someone that can take them. So I think that the one that still remains, and if I had a magic wand, we'd try and make that accessibility, especially transportation issue and barrier, go away.
I completely hear you. And it's a common challenge for any therapy that's location based, that's not within a traditional hospital or even primary care. And we had 30% attendance at cardiac rehab after people had heart attacks because transport was the big issue. There are only two major hospitals in the county I worked at you could get rehab. They were both 20 miles apart in the middle of a county that stretched 100 miles from one end to the other. So if you couldn't get there, you weren't coming on the bus because you never arrived. So that transport is a real challenge, and I'm sure once you've established a really strong presence within a golf club, that might be the kind of volunteering route that you could ask people to go down potentially. And I'm sure your co-production piece might have held some answers as well, I suspect.
Well, the one brilliant question we always ask in the co-production process, because you do obviously get things that aren't going well with the delivery of the program and when you've got feedback from your customers, the question we always ask ourselves is, how might we? So we turn a challenge into a potential opportunity. So as you can imagine, the great and the good of the project team and everything else have all been thinking about those community transport networks and everything else, the volunteer driver schemes and all that, and how we can build that into the DNA of the services that we sort of are designing and delivering as well. And if we can overcome that barrier, then I think, yes, we'll have more opportunities to access the 2,500 golf clubs in this country and give more people the opportunity to get out there and enjoy that sort of later life, really, at the local golf club.
Absolutely. Do you think you've got enough support amongst the kind of the political bits of the golfing world? The RNA, the national societies and county associations. Do you feel you've got traction amongst that group yet?
When we started in 2016, if you'd asked me that question, I would have said no, because to be honest, we were a nobody. I was a one-man social entrepreneur with a mission based on, his dad passing away, who loved sport later in life, wanting to make a difference through golf and through sport. I wasn't a PGA professional. I had no sort of ologies behind my name or anything. So we didn't have any traction at all or credibility. But I'll tell you what, Charlie, the getting involved with Dr. Andrew Murray, getting involved with yourself, getting involved with all the golf and health project, and all of those things, and then getting the empirical evidence, our first bit through the Advanced Wellbeing Research Centre and Sport Industry Research Centre in Sheffield. All of a sudden, people just started to prick their ears a little bit. And where we sit today, of having, at the end of the day, our last two research projects have had £500,000 worth of government funding, to deliver them and prove the concept, get the evidence and the research. I mean, we never would have had that in the formative years because people didn't understand what we did, the credibility of it, and the potential impact of it because there was no evidence. But now we've got that evidence. The great and the good at not just the golfing world, the sporting world, the health and social care world, they are starting now to sit up. And we were very lucky to get mentioned in the House of Commons. And that's
well done.
Is it the Hansa record? So it's there.
Hansard.
Yeah. So it's there forever. So we have made a bit of movement since since the early days and since we last spoke, really. But there's still a lot more to do, and I think it's something that I really want to get more support of in the future because this is such a good news story, and it's not going to cost anybody a fortune to embrace it. All you're doing is you're investing in proven services, all delivered by passionate people who want to make a difference, not just from the golf industry, but from the allied health professional industry and everybody else. All you're doing is if you want to make a difference to the way that our people enjoy those happy, healthy later years, is invest in great people because the infrastructure is already there. We just need that support to sort of fast track it and get it adopted at scale, really.
Absolutely. And I think your presence encouraged the RNA to open that centre up in Glasgow, the Golfits Centre up there, which is a community centre built around some golf facilities as well. But they haven't pinched your ID yet, and they ought to. So one of the things I always say to my students when you're with policymakers, make sure you ask what you want really clearly. And actually, you've got I don't know how the model will work, whether it should be a franchise or it's type, not as in buy it, but you know what I mean, kind of copy it and make it bigger. I think adaptation and adoption is probably the best way to take it forward. But you have spiked them to recognize the value of a physical location where people gather to do a weird social experiment called golf and have coffee. Is a really valuable resource. So let's kind of open the doors a bit more.
Totally.
And do it. Very true.
Charlie, this has been a fantastic conversation so far, and I want to move it. I want to move it on now to the future because we've got a lot of evidence together. There's, as you call it, our library, and there's loads of things that need to go into that library of evidence, research that we should all be able to reference. But I think the library is pretty full at the minute in terms of the benefits of enjoying activity and sport in later life and the fringe benefits of being more social out in green space and all of that. So for me, it was quite interesting that recently I had the pleasure of listening to Professor Chris Whitty address the Healthy Aging Conference down in London, where he went through his CMO report, and for me it was very interesting to listen to that because he gave policymakers and medical professionals a couple of sort of challenges and tasks, and he was really clear about it. And one that really stood out to me is the geographical concentrations of older populations and the way that as people age, they sort of go into rural settings and coastal settings, which actually is where our provision of health services are their lowest. So there's a real sort of disconnect in terms of resources and population trends there. So I thought that was an interesting one that I would just sort of like you to maybe just have a comment on.
Yeah, so you're absolutely spot on because this is the man who's hopefully 5 years from retiring. Don't tell my boss. When you've got you've got sort of fewer demands on you as a carer, and you've got some bit of disposable income and a bit of a pension. There's always that to, well, shall we go to the coast? Should we go to the countryside and kind of reinvent ourselves and have a new life while we retire? And it's all great until you're well, and then you're not, and then you're isolated from your social network. You don't have a major teaching hospital down the road because you're not in a city, and you do find yourself in that slightly more exposed position as well. So yes, Chris Whitty. So I had the privilege of working with Chris Whitty for a number of years and during the COVID crisis. He's an unbelievably thoughtful man. He is absolutely scientifically driven by evidence and rational logic. Quite ironically different to the government he served, but that's a whole other different podcast. So Chris was really wants to get things right, and I know when I have worked with him in the past, he wants to know the evidence. He wants to know how good it is and its strength and its magnitude, and are there groups who are not being served by existing services? He has a real sense of inequalities are not fair and we need to do something about it. Now, that's not, with a small p, a very public political message right now, but it's the one that matters the most because our inequalities are getting worse and our older adults are suffering more as a result.
So that to me was quite a fascinating insight, but good for us because, as you know, there's plenty of golf courses in rural areas. And also, we're not short of a few links golf courses around the country. That could be a beautiful alignment for our type of intervention, really, in supporting those rural and coastal communities as well. The one that I was very interested in that Chris set the sort of medical professionals was the way that at the moment the whole medical professional is very much set up into silos and single morbidity. And as you know, as we age, we generally live with multiple morbidities. And because of the audiences we work with, we often see a carer and we see a person with their own main morbidity, but other morbidities related to that or separate to that. So between those two people, you could be dealing with 6 or 7 morbidities. And those multimorbidities, at the moment, the way the system is all set up, are single silos.
Yeah.
And I think that it's for what we've tried to do with our recent program in terms of reimagining golf clubs as health hubs, is we've tried to look across the morbidities, across the challenges, and come up with a more holistic intervention at one time in one location. And for me, that was music to our ears. Because obviously we picked a great project to show how you can look across morbidities to have, multiple outcomes. But I just wondered again, with your professional background, what your thoughts were on that.
Well, yes, of course. So with the medicine, you spend, 10 years training to deal with everything, and then you choose one thing to focus on for the rest of your life. And it's, that is good because we have an unbelievably brilliant series of medics, nurses, and allied health professionals who are all fantastic at looking at, one particular system in the body in a really intensive way. But that holistic sort of step back view is often lost. And I think what you're saying is, you've got somebody who's got cardiac issues, the diabetes, potentially metabolic disease, arthritic, joint problems, cognitive impairments, and then actually psychologically they're a little bit anxious, a little bit depressed. They have all these things swirling away inside them, and that's what we all do as human beings. We're no one's 100% anymore. So of course the therapy for that in an individual way would be pills for your cardiac and insulin for your diabetes and some more pills for your thing, or a bit of CBT for the cognitive stuff. Well, amazingly, if you put people into a social situation, give them an activity that's fun and hilarious, and they are like-minded, similar folk to them, and that's really important. I'll stress this. So when I've worked with cancer patients in groups, they don't want to talk about their cancer. They want to talk about what they had last week and did you see the football? They all know that's why they're there, but they don't want to stress that bit. So we're all here because we've all got, cognitive impairment and caring issues and a whole bunch of other stuff going on. But we're here to have a good time.
Yeah.
So, therapeutically, the movement, the strength, the balance, the camaraderie, the fun, those are the magic ingredients that can cut across the comorbidities. They're just entry points into the system. And what you have to do is encourage those health professionals to be brave and say, well, you know what? It's not going to do you any harm, is it? Go along, try it, see what you think. And that's what I would encourage my patients to do all the time, is experiment, try things out. Try the crochet circling club if that's what you want to do. Try the bird watching group. Try the singing group. Play a musical instrument. Go and count the trains as they go past. That's why one of my patients is obsessed train spotter. Loved it, but stopped doing it because he thought he couldn't be able to walk up and down the stairs at the railway station. Yeah. So we got him back there, and we got the guard to help him. It was a bit like you're working the golf club. Yeah. The guard kept an eye on him, made sure he was okay. Oh, there's a lift over here. You can go up there and sit up there. We'll put a seat up for you. It was fantastic. It was happy as a sandboy. So you just have to kind of do those particular things.
And I think that what topped off Chris's great presentation was that he said, this is an optimistic report. And I thought that was really good. And the reason he said it's an optimistic report, he says one of the best things you have as a GP is you get people come into your surgery and they say, yeah, you know what, I've got a few challenges now, but I've had a good innings. And I think that, if we, and again, another sporting analogy, if we can get more people through all of these great spaces and places and opportunities to feel as though they've had a good innings, especially in those later life years when opportunity and challenges and the things that they enjoy sometimes fall out their life. If we can just make those end of life years much more about enjoying it rather than just existing it, I think job well done, really. And I think wouldn't that be the last question I've got for you is looking to the future. Well, that will be a great future for me. And I just wondered what your thoughts on the future were, and any sort of top tips that you would give to policymakers and health professionals and innovators out there.
How long have we got?
Just a few seconds. No, only joking.
Okay. No. Well, first of all, I do share your optimisms. As I see my own parents and my in-laws and relatives and friends, it's that sort of decline suddenly accelerates, and that's the thing I think is the saddest. You can see somebody who could, with the right intervention, not have gone quite so quickly and could still be going to the choir and could still be going to church independently and be able to, go down to the shops and buy some things to make some cakes for the grandchildren. That independence is fundamental once that goes. And that's about being walking strong enough, confident enough, and kind of feeling able to kind of look after yourself from a functional point of view. Those are really what we're after. Adding quality to those last years is what we want, not just adding years to those last years, I think, definitely. Message for the policymakers. I'd really like them to come and watch one of your sessions. I think there's nothing better than seeing it in reality. Most politicians I know don't really like speaking to real people because it's terrifying and that real people are challenging and a little bit out of control, which is good. But actually seeing the realities of what it's like to exist in this way of life, and why these couple of hours are the absolute tonic for them for so many reasons. And you won't need to say anything because they'll say it for you.
Absolutely that. And you know what? There goes an open invitation to any policymakers or health and social care movers and shakers to join any one of our sessions at our 23 venues now across the UK, really, and growing.
Fantastic.
So,
fantastic. I want to get you into Ireland. I want to get you into Ireland. That's where we're going next.
Oh, well, it took me a while to get my Scottish passport, so I'll work on my Irish passport now. But my thing really about that is that you're absolutely right. There's no substitute for seeing it in action. I don't have to say a single word. And I suppose I'm so privileged as a social entrepreneur, an innovator, that I could put any of my customers, my team up on stage, and I could go on holiday for a week and I know I wouldn't worry about what they said. And I
Mm.
think as a leader, that is something that I feel quite proud about, knowing that the people that work with us, the people that we support, are such great ambassadors and are so thankful for the opportunity to be involved in something so special, really. And I think for me, Charlie, you're one of those ambassadors because you help us spread the word. I mean, not just because of your professional background and else, but you genuinely believe in what we're doing, and to have someone in your position and others like Doc Murray and Roger Hawkes and others,
Yeah,
it just makes my job that much easier, knowing that I've got great people in my corner. And for that, I'm really thankful, and especially thankful for your time today. And I hope
no,
you have enjoyed it as much as I've enjoyed it. And I'm sure the audience will have done that as well, Charlie.
it's been a real pleasure, Anthony, and always delighted to chat to you. And good luck, everybody listening. Keep out there and keep going to try and hit that silly little ball in a hole.
Yeah. Thanks for your time, Charlie.
All the best. All right, take care.